When we think of the Salem witch trials, we often picture a handful of afflicted girls. But historian Marilyn K. Roach identifies 73 people who claimed affliction during the crisis. This larger group included adults, such as Ann Putnam Sr. and John Indian. Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson. The afflicted persons influenced every aspect of the Salem witch trials. Their accusations determined who was arrested, their testimony convicted the innocent, and their fits in the courtroom sealed the fate of the accused.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jack. Today, we're looking at the afflicted persons, who they were, how the crisis began, and how their role evolved from now through the height of the trials.
The afflictions didn't spring up out of nowhere. There were previously recorded afflictions in many witchcraft cases in Europe, in England, in Connecticut, in Boston. So many places there were afflicted persons at the center of witchcraft accusations. People supposedly bewitched and made ill by witches. There were a series of witch trials in Sweden called the Great Noise in the 1660s and 1670s. And during this period, 280 people were accused of witchcraft. And this started with children telling stories about being afflicted by witches and abducted and taken to sabbats with them. Their behavior of these children was reported in books that were read in Massachusetts. They have reports of these afflictions, details that can be mimicked. Then you have a famous case in Connecticut during the Hartford witch panic. One of the key antagonists in that trials was Ann Cole, who was said to be possessed or afflicted. Now, there's a fine line between possession and affliction. Was it the devil or a demon controlling her when she spoke in Dutch tones? Or was it witchcraft that caused her to speak that way and to behave in extreme ways, contrary to the nature of a good woman in Connecticut? A more direct influence on the Salem witch trial afflicted persons came in 1688 when the Goodwin children of Boston accused their laundress of stealing some laundry and then accused the mother of the laundress of witchcraft when she got angry about these accusations against her daughter. And the children, believing that they had been cursed by Goodwife Glover, they behaved in such ways that we can see direct parallels to Salem Village in 1692. And all of this stuff, again, is published in a book, Memorable Providences by Cotton Mather in 1689. And this book is widely read in Massachusetts, and people tell the stories, retell the stories that are in it of the Goodwins behaving just like what we're going to describe the Salem Village girls and adults of doing.
So, in January of 1692, this affliction crisis starts in the home of the minister Samuel Parris in Salem Village. His daughter, Betty, and his niece, Abigail Williams, began to exhibit strange symptoms. They displayed behaviors such as barking like dogs and quacking like chickens and hiding under furniture and attempting to walk into fireplaces. And like the Goodwin children in Boston, a doctor diagnosed it couldn't be anything other than witchcraft.
In Boston, Dr. Oakes had declared that the girls were under a diabolical influence, and then Dr. William Griggs says they're under an evil hand in Salem Village. And the day after he declares this, a neighbor of the Samuel Parris household decides that she wants to test who is the witch that's afflicting them, because he says it's under an evil hand. It's got to be a witch. And so she brings instructions over to tell Tituba and John Indian how to bake a witch cake, which is rye flour mixed with the urine of the afflicted girls. They do this at the Parris house while Samuel Parris and his wife Elizabeth are away attending a lecture. After this witch cake incident, afflictions the same day spread to Ann Putnam Jr. and Elizabeth Hubbard.
That week, the girls began naming their tormentors, and they specifically started with Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. The afflictions spread further to individuals like Mary Walcott and Mercy Lewis and began occurring publicly during church services and throughout witch examinations, and they continued to spread all throughout Essex County.
Now let's talk about some of the key individuals who showed afflictions during the Salem witch trials. The first person to exhibit the symptoms was Betty Parris. She was 9 years old at the time, the daughter of the Salem Village minister Samuel Parris. She's one of the first two children to be afflicted, along with her cousin Abigail Williams. Their symptoms included contortions, and Betty was throwing herself on the floor during examinations of these people that were accused of witchcraft. So Betty, her parents take the decision to send her away from home for the rest of the witch trials. She's actually sent to Salem town to live with Stephen Sewell, who becomes the clerk of the court of Oyer and Terminer, and he's the brother of Judge Samuel Sewell, who's on that court of Oyer and Terminer. But Betty is separated from the other afflicted people, and she seems to improve in her condition. And she's not involved in any more of the trials and legal proceedings. You don't see a lot of testimonies from Betty Parris, because once she gets moved to Stephen Sewell's house, she's out of the picture as far as witch trials go. But she lived a long and productive life, dying in the 1760s.
Her cousin, Abigail Williams, was 11 years old and lived there with them. She's often portrayed as an older teenager in fiction, like The Crucible, but she was a child at the time. She wasn't having romantic escapades with men accused of witchcraft. Abigail was a key accuser who provided vivid testimony. She claimed seeing George Burroughs attending a witch sacrament involving red bread and blood wine in the pasture at her house. She demonstrated behaviors like running around rooms, flapping her arms, and famously cried out, "Wish, wish." She disappears from the historical record after the trial, and we don't know her death date or her location after that.
Another very key witness and accuser against many, many people is Ann Putnam Jr. She's 12 years old at the time of the Salem Witch Trials, the daughter of Thomas Putnam Jr. and Ann Putnam Sr. And she's one of the most active accusers throughout the witch trials. Her name appeared in over 100 depositions. She claimed, among other things, to see the ghosts of George Burroughs' first two wives, who told her they had been murdered by George. Her family was heavily involved in the accusations. Her father Thomas and Uncle Edward filed many of the initial complaints. Her father wrote dozens of depositions, and her mother was also afflicted. Ann Putnam Jr. is the only one of the afflicted people known to have publicly apologized. In 1706, she stood up in church while her apology was read by Minister Joseph Green, stating she had been deluded by Satan and specifically apologizing to the family of Rebecca Nurse. She remained unmarried through her life, raised her siblings after her parents died pretty young, and she died at a relatively young age herself.
As we mentioned, her mother was one of the afflicted individuals, Ann Putnam Sr., who was in her mid-30s. Contrary to the fictional portrayal in The Crucible, she did not lose 7 infants shortly after birth. Unlike the younger girls involved in the accusations, Ann Sr. was a full-fledged adult, her participation changed the legal nature of the proceedings because adult testimony carried significantly more weight in court than that of the children. She was a primary accuser of Rebecca Nurse and claimed to have engaged in a 2-hour physical struggle with Nurse's specter on March 18, 1692. She testified that Nurse's specter appeared to her wearing only a shift and nightcap, holding a little red book, and threatening to tear her soul from her body if Ann did not sign it. During Rebecca Nurse's examination, Ann Sr. shouted out accusations asking, "Did you not bring the black man with you? Did you not bid me tempt God and die?" Ann Sr. testified that she saw the ghost of her 6 deceased nieces from Boston. She claimed these apparitions called her auntie and told her that Rebecca Nurse had murdered them. She played a key role in validating gossip that witchcraft ran in the Town family. She testified that she heard John Putnam Jr., her brother-in-law, say it was no wonder Rebecca Nurse and Mary Esty were witches because their mother Joanna Town had been one before them. Along with Rebecca Nurse, she claimed to be tormented by the specter of Martha Corey because she refused to join their ranks. She provided a deposition detailing day-by-day accounts of her torments from these women.
Now let's talk about Elizabeth Hubbard. She's another person who gets afflicted very early in the game. She was about 17 years old, making her one of the older afflicted girls, and old enough that she could legally testify under oath. She was an orphan living as a maid with her great aunt and her uncle, Dr. William Griggs, the village physician, who was the one who diagnosed the afflicted girls, Betty and Abigail, as being under the evil hand. So it's not a surprise to me that the affliction spread to his niece / servant, who may have accompanied him to the afflicted girl's home on one or more occasions and been exposed to the afflictions. She was a major accuser, testifying against many, including Sarah Good. She claimed that Sarah Good sent a wolf to attack her, and she testified against Rebecca Nurse. She fell into fits during examinations, claiming she was pinched and pricked by specters.
Another adult that was afflicted was Bathsheba Pope. She's notably the aunt of Benjamin Franklin. She experienced afflictions during church services, such as being struck blind. She also had fits, and during the examination of Elizabeth Proctor, Bathsheba claimed her feet were afflicted.
She's infamous for throwing first her muff and then a shoe at Martha Corey, eventually striking Martha in the head with the shoe after the muff kind of just floated gracefully. Sarah Bibber was another adult. She was a woman of relatively low social status and didn't have the best reputation in town. She rarely initiated accusations, but would corroborate the claims of others, saying, "That happened to me too." She testified that the apparition of Sarah Good pressed her breath out, pinched her child, and choked her. The judges appeared to find her testimony trustworthy, even though witnesses testified against her, saying that she was lying under oath in court.
It wasn't just the girls and women who were afflicted. John Indian, the husband of Tituba, became an afflicted accuser as well. He was an enslaved indigenous man living in the household with Tituba and was there and participated in the baking of the witch cake. It's important to recognize that he had a lot of vulnerability. He was an outsider associated with the household where the trouble began, and he was in a precarious position similar to his wife, Tituba, who was the first person accused. Following his wife's accusation and imprisonment, John began to display symptoms of affliction himself. He became an active participant in the examinations of other suspects. During the examination of Elizabeth Proctor and Sarah Cloyce, he claimed to be bitten, choked, and pinched by their specters.
Specifically, John accused Elizabeth Proctor and John Willard. When he was asked during Elizabeth Proctor's examination who hurt him, he identified her, Elizabeth Proctor, claiming that her specter came to him at the parsonage and tried to force him to sign the Devil's Book. And then during John Willard's examination, John Indian cried out, "Oh, he cuts me," contributing to the spectral evidence used against Willard. His behavior angered skeptics like John Proctor. Proctor, who viewed the accusers as frauds, famously threatened to beat the devil out of John Indian to cure his fits. Beyond accusing, John Indian also worked at Ingersoll's Tavern, where many examinations were held, sometimes displaying his afflictions there for an audience, as is recorded in the records left of the Salem Witch Trials.
Was this self-preservation for John? While his wife confessed and was imprisoned, he avoided imprisonment by integrating himself into the groups of the accusers. By claiming affliction, he moved from being a potential suspect due to his involvement with the witch cake and his relationship to Tituba to a witness for the prosecution, granting him a degree of power and safety during this ordeal.
Join us tomorrow as we continue following the events of the witch trials as they unfolded. For more resources and to support our work connecting historical witch trials to contemporary persecution, visit inwitchhunts.org.